Yeah, g'day, Bush Camping Tools here today. Well, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to tell you a little about these kinds of knife handles with different polymers like Kraton, Forprene, TPEE, etc. And the pros and cons, and that's the pros and cons from the manufacturer's point of view and the pros and cons from the user's point of view of owning a knife with a handle like these kinds of handles like this. Okay, so stick around. So I want to talk about synthetic handles, specifically these polymers, not composite handles. So I'm not talking about Micarta or G10, which are composites, thermosetting composites, sometimes thermoset, sometimes thermoplastics. I want to talk about the other popular kinds of handles other than wood and Micarta and G10. And obviously natural products, I'm going to leave that out of it. But let's look at this selection of knives here, and these kind of represent most of the various different products. So we've got these 2 or 3 handles here. These are made out of what's called Forprene, and this material Forprene can come in many different hardnesses, what they call shore hardnesses, from soft to essentially very, very hard. The next lot of synthetic products here, we've got these ones here. Can you see those 2 there? These 2 knives here, and these incorporate Kraton, which is spelt with a K if you don't know that, Kraton, and that's a very, very nice polymer too. And then this one here, this one comes in a Kraton-like material, a TPEE material there. Okay, so one of the things that you can see here with these types of handles, this handle material, is they can be molded essentially in almost any shapes and sizes. And because of that, from a manufacturing point of view, once a good shape is obtained, you make a mold, you only have to make it once. And there's no need to hand finish these things because they just get molded and bolted on or injection molded around the handle, whatever, and that's it. So let's start down here for a start with this particular knife. And this has a bit of a, what you might call, can you see that there? Yeah, this is what's called, a bit of a funny looking grip on here, this cutaway in here and this tapered end down there. And this is Forprene. This knife happens to be an Extrema ratio model, and several of their models actually carry this type of handle on them. And when I first saw it myself, to be honest, it looked rather weird, to say the least. It certainly doesn't look like a conventional knife handle, but in actual fact, it's a very comfortable handle, and I'll tell you why. Because it tapers towards the rear end like that, and your hand naturally closes. You see there's a smaller hole there than what would be in between my larger fingers and my upper fingers, so your hand naturally fits like that, and you can see that there like that, right? Okay, and this flat section in there prevents a twisting in the handle, and it's a quite comfortable feel. It's has a little bit of a tacky feel to it, yeah, so that's with that there, with that Forprene. Now the other model here, this is another Forprene handle on here, and this is on a fox knife, and many of their knives also come with this same molded handle, and this is left and right. You see these marks here for the fingers. If you just watch this, you see your fingers naturally will fall, depending on how big your hand is, of course, fall into those marks there like that. And if I was left-handed, it would be the same on the other side. You see there, can you see them there on there like that? Right, so this is also Forprene. It's a little bit different Forprene to the Extrema Forprene. This feels a little more tackier possibly on the outside there. So you've got that Forprene there. Now this is another knife here with a different looking grip altogether again too, and this is also Forprene, but in this case rather than being molded over the entire tang, because you see here on these you can't see the tang here or there, right? Okay, and whoops, and the same for this one here. You can't see the tang except for that little bit up there. All right, just put those up there. I don't want them to get blunt. Put them down there. But this one, these are bolted on here as if they're just regular slabs, as if they were G10 or something like that on there. And again, it provides the same kind of feel. This is a little bit, feels a bit like the Extrema ratio feel too. This is a Nieto knife from Spain. So you've got that. Now that brings me on to the other kind of grip which is common, and this is Kraton. Okay, with a case, K-R-A-T-O-N, another polymer. And this is an Ontario knife, the Spec Plus, This one's actually been with me for 20 odd years. It's a very grippy. Kraton has a very much tacky feel to it. It feels a little softer or tackier than Forprene, and there's some good marks in this too. See, these can be molded into the knife and prevent slippage. So you've got Kraton there. Here's another Kraton, but which is not molded over the entire tang. You can see it's again put on like as if they were slabs of, you know, wood or G10 or something, or Micarta. And this is a Kisler Supreme knife, this one here, and it has the same kind of, exactly the same feel as this Ontario there. It's a good tacky thing. It too tapers towards the rear end, like that there, and it's got this cutaway in here. Your thumb just naturally falls into that there, and you can see there's still space for a bigger hand. My hand's about an 8.5, 9, so a size 10, 11 hand is still going to fit onto there. And lastly, I've got this one here. This is from a relatively newcomer into the field of knives. This is for a company called G10, and this is completely molded over the handle. So why these kinds of handles as opposed to Micarta or G10 or wood or bone? Well, first of all, if we stick with the synthetics, I'll talk about bone at another time, stag or whatever, is that these handles from a manufacturing point of view, as I've said, the manufacturer can produce exactly the same handle on every single knife. Whereas if it's a Micarta or G10, unless it's finished completely with a CNC milling process, it will be finished off by hand a bit, and the handles will be a little bit different. So we're talking a saving on labor potentially there with that. A disadvantage is, of course, if the manufacturer was to make a handle that wasn't so great, it could be costly to replace the mold to make a new handle. Okay, but what about the user? Well, the user's advantages are that these handle materials are generally, because they're less denser than things like Micarta or G10, they're going to be slightly lighter. The other really cool thing about these types of handles are, and that is what the other ones just cannot do, and that is these handles can absorb shock. So any shock that comes through the knife, they're going to be able to absorb it a lot better than you know, something that's very hard like Micarta or G10 that is going to transmit the shock to the hand. So if you don't wear gloves, gloves of course will help absorb the shock, but if you haven't got your gloves on or whatever, a handle such as this or these, any of these, are really going to absorb shock quite well, and that's something that G10 and Micarta are not going to do. Now, these, a disadvantage of having, so that's an advantage. A disadvantage of these types of handles is that if you want to use some knives sporting G10 and Micarta have got Fibre drill divots in the handle, so you can use this as a top block essentially. Well, you cannot do that with these kind of synthetics because they would just simply melt. You know, you get enough friction in there, they're going to start to melt or they're going to start to wear quite a lot. So manufacturers can't incorporate that in there, and if you like that on a knife, you won't get that on a handle like this, such as these. The other thing about these handles are they're generally pretty grippy in the wet. Okay, so unless there's a milled pattern into the Micarta or G10 to help keep those knives, you know, comfortably grippy in the hand with wet or slimy hands, they could be slippery, whereas these kind of handles, these materials are generally not slippery. They're in fact quite tacky. They get wet mud, that kind of stuff. They're still good like that. They also require less maintenance. The other thing is, in terms of absorbing water, on a practical sense of sense, I'm not talking about the laboratory, but on a practical side of things, outdoor things, these kinds of materials, they tend not to absorb water too much. Whereas if you don't have G10 or Micarta finished properly on the outside, the fibers can transmit water into the G10 or the Micarta, and that's easily seen. You can take your G10 or Micarta scaled knives, put them in the water, they'll change color. They change color because they've now absorbed water, and that water goes down to the tang, and if they're on a non-stainless steel, it will start rusting the tang if you don't take them off and do some maintenance. So the maintenance issue on these kinds of knives with these kind of handles is far, far less on that. Okay.